defeats Kevin Lee. Triangle choke, late round 3, becomes the UFC's interim lightweight champion. My man Ken Flo twice fought for the UFC's 155-pound title. Kenny, no fighter in the history of the UFC lightweight division has won 10 fights in a row. Give me some context, and we can talk about the fight interspersed in here, but give me some context, because I'm not the guy to provide it historically as to just how great a lightweight this is, because on paper, nobody at 155 pounds has been able to sustain this type of excellence without at one point running into their match.
Well, that's the thing. Tyron Woodley and I were going back and forth on what the most difficult weight class in the UFC is. And again, for me, it's the 155-pound weight class.
Yep.
Look at what Rafael Dos Anjos is doing in that weight class. Look at what Donald Cerrone is doing in that weight class. These guys are 155-pounders. Donald Cerrone never won the belt in that weight class, and here he is just running through everyone in the welterweight division, almost beating Robbie Lawler, the former champion at the welterweight division. Rafael Dos Anjos, who's currently undefeated at welterweight, who's running through guys. What was Neil Magny like? 7 in the division? Made it look like he never had a UFC fight before. No offense, Neil Magny.
It sounds like Tyron Woodley did not win this argument on
television. Well, I mean, it's tough to make that argument when you have two lightweights in the welterweight division just destroying everybody. But again, that's how difficult this lightweight division is. So that I wanted to put a little bit of context into that. And with Ferguson, the fact that he's faced everybody in that division. Dos Anjos, former champion. And to do that against a variety of fighters, guys that are excellent grapplers and wrestlers and strikers, Barbosa. I mean, if you don't consider Barbosa the most technical striker in the UFC, you got a problem. And he
Hall of Fame talent.
Hall of Fame talent. He just kept walking through those kicks somehow. I have no idea. Just continued pressing forward. Even when he was hurt and almost out, he found a way to come back. And Tony Ferguson just has a mindset of an absolute savage. And I think that's what separates him. Is he the most technical fighter in the world? Absolutely not. Does he have holes in his game? For sure. But this is a guy that has been consistent in the toughest division in the sport, period. And there's no guy that deserves, on paper, what he's done, there's no guy that deserves to fight Conor McGregor more than Tony Ferguson. That's it. No one has been as consistent as him. Khabib Nurmagomedov, very good, has not faced the competition to Tony Ferguson. Khabib Nurmagomedov, unfortunately, has not consistently made weight like Tony Ferguson. So, again, it's a pretty easy argument, for who deserves that next shot as far as statistics, as far as what the bulk of work has shown. That guy is Tony Ferguson. Nate Diaz, a bigger fight. That's a bigger fight for Conor McGregor. However, I think Conor McGregor, maybe to appease the fans a little bit, and also just to kind of defend his belt and show how great he is as a fighter, needs to fight Tony Ferguson if he wants to get that win. And obviously, both these guys, phenomenal fighters, both these guys very good at hyping up the fight. I think the fight would still be very, very big. But I was really impressed with Tony Ferguson. And Kevin Lee is not the easiest of matchups for him, style-wise. I thought Lee was a better wrestler. I think he showed that. He was able to get position on Tony Ferguson. But the experience factor. I mean, Ferguson's a guy that you just know he's not going to quit. And Lee just was a little bit too emotional out there for me. I've been there. I've made that mistake. And when I saw him walk out, Tyron Woodley and I were talking about it. We just didn't like what we saw because, again, it takes time to get used to fighting in the octagon time and time again. And that was the big thing with Kevin Lee was, how good is he really? How much experience does he really have? What has he seen in the octagon? We know what Tony Ferguson has seen. He's gone to some very dark places in that octagon. And in the end, when their back was against the wall, it was Tony Ferguson who responded, and responded very well. However, Kevin Lee, looking back at this fight, will be able to look at a lot of positives. Passing the guard of Tony Ferguson, getting mount position, landing some heavy shots on Ferguson. Landing some nice shots on the feet as well. So I think he has a lot of positives to take away from this experience, both kind of his mental approach and his technical approach. But in the end, Ferguson absolutely deserved it and showed why he's one of the best lightweights in the world.
And in terms of 155 pounds, it's so tough that former champions go up and down, right, just to get the fuck out of the lightweight shark waters.
Yeah.
So I think you made a good argument there. In terms of Tony Ferguson, he spoke more so this week than during prior fight weeks, and maybe because he had a microphone in his face more often, but just about his collegiate wrestling career and how hard it was to be the team captain and become a two-time national champion, and how that really fortified him mentally and has been really the foundation with which he has built everything MMA related on top of. He talked about The Ultimate Fighter, a show on which he totally dominated and finished everybody, as another building block. He has been so primely built, Kenny, to be a champion. And now here he is, as I said, on paper, no lightweight has done what he has been able to do. And I'm not going to sit here and say that he supplants BJ Penn or some of these other guys as the greatest lightweight in UFC history. But you do know I like the absolute type conversations.
Yeah.
And Conor McGregor has one fight at 155 pounds. Hey, I think Conor and Tony is a very close fight on paper. A lot of people, are on different sides of that. But Conor McGregor right now has one fight in the UFC at 155 pounds. Tony Ferguson has a lot more than that and has won his last 10.
And think about how good it would be for Conor if he went out there and beat Tony Ferguson. You know what I mean? Because, as a fighter, anytime you face another guy, you have the ability to kind of take everything that guy has accomplished in a lot of ways. If he goes out there and finishes a guy like Tony Ferguson, I think he shuts up even more people. I mean, people are always going to doubt Conor McGregor because of how loud he is and, braggadocious and all that stuff. But, again, it's an awesome opportunity for Conor McGregor to really go out there and fight Tony Ferguson. Everyone wants to see it. He's proved it, that he deserves it. And then after that, maybe he can fight in Nate Diaz. And I think that would be the right approach. I really do.
All right, give me a quick answer on this. As to beating Tony Ferguson, I know he does drop the hands a little bit, drops that left hand. So you just think for Conor McGregor, take advantage of that with a potentially concussive strike and separate him from consciousness, which you'll have to do to get somebody that tough out of there, right? I mean, is that?
Yes. Yeah, and that's where Tony Ferguson, I think, really needs to be a little bit cleaner, or at least maybe mix things up even more against a slick striker like a Conor McGregor, or just take him to the mat. I mean, Tony Ferguson, obviously, he has the advantage on the mat, and Conor McGregor certainly has the advantage on the feet.
Kevin Lee, and we could, again, give him a full 5 minutes here, but we'll be quicker. So he could have done a lot of his weight cut with the benefit of the UFC Performance Institute, right, and chose not to. And I think ultimately moving forward, I don't love him at 170 pounds. So if he continues to fight at 155, I think you'll see him manage that better. When I talked to him on Tuesday, Kenny, he was worried about that championship pound, right? He even mentioned that extra pound. And I know you can speak to that. 156 and 155 are different beasts. But I just want to say, the nutritionist at the UFC Performance Institute, and his name escapes me. He's worked with hundreds of athletes, Kenny. Even though Kevin Lee maybe didn't take all of their advice to optimize his weight cut, said it's the mentally toughest athlete he's ever been around. And it sounds to me, Kenny, like Kevin Lee's weight cut, was as harrowing as some of the ones that you've gone through. And I really do think next level toughness. I just felt very confident that given that extra hour, I hate to say it this way, but he would be willing, Kenny, to stare death in the face to make sure he made 54 and a half or 55.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this guy is very mentally tough. That's what makes it scary for a lot of these fighters is that they will do it. You know what I mean? For me,
you too, bro.
Well, for me, there was not going to be a 155.1. There just wasn't. I had to make championship weight, or 145.1 or whatever it was.
See what it did to him, folks?
I can't even remember the weight class. I mean, you got to make championship weight, and that was awesome that Kevin Lee was able to come back and make the weight. But I mean, when we interviewed him on UFC Tonight on Wednesday, dude, his face looked very full. Tony Ferguson looked sucked out already. I was concerned for Tony. And for Kevin Lee, I said, well, I guess his weight is good. I mean, his face was totally full. It almost looked swollen. Yeah. So I was a little confused, but obviously his weight was not managed as efficiently as it could have been. It really is an art. It's something you got to get on. And as you get older, again, as Kevin Lee gets older, it's going to be more difficult. He's going to have to be way more disciplined with it. And the problem is weight cuts change. A weight cut that you had in December may very well be very different than the one you have in May or April, or you know what I mean? It really depends on how your body is adjusting to what you've been doing in camp, all camp. to eat and prepare for the fight. So
Right.
it's tricky. It's not a perfect science. And I think for Kevin Lee, I know he hangs out a lot at the UFC Performance Institute. I think going forward, I think he should get that help and be as professional as he can, and to help him have the best performance he can. And also, you know, he had a big welt on his chest. I know you guys talked about the possibility of him maybe having staph.
Right.
It could have been. That is not a normal thing. And again, as your immune system goes low, as you're training a lot, and you're in this kind of environment where there's maybe some dirty equipment or maybe a dirty training partner or whatever, those things do happen. I've had staph a few times. It is not fun. It drains your energy. And then if you're taking antibiotics like I have before a few fights, you just don't feel the same. And also sometimes antibiotics can get you to retain water. So it gets very, very tricky, man. There's so many things. People don't realize how difficult it is to make weight and how many factors go into that. If you're sick, if you're not sick, if you're on medication, if you're not. I mean, there really is a lot at play. And as you mentioned, there really is a very big difference between 156 pounds and 155 pounds. The way I always equate it is go ahead, run a marathon, do that marathon. You did it. Great job. Hey, can you run another 5 miles for us?
Yeah,
That's what it's like to cut that extra pound. So for everyone goes, it's just a pound. I don't get it. Why didn't you just make that 155? Well, there's a lot going on.
And I'll fill you in on some of the horrifying details off the air. I'll spare our audience here. And not a ton of fat to cut on Kevin Lee, but I do think cleaning up the diet and getting ahead of it. You know, let's also not forget in June, Flo, he weighed in Oklahoma City at 10:59 a.m., right? So I think he feels like that's the way he wants to approach it, right? He doesn't necessarily, you know, Cormier has complained about the morning weigh-in because he doesn't like to